Hello everybody, Bryan here with the SFF Hub. I'm here today in downtown Vancouver with Mr. R.A. Salvatore, the final stop on his book tour for his new book, Gauntlgrym. Bob, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Well, it's my pleasure.
So, this is the last stop on your book tour. Has it been going pretty good for you so far?
Tour's been going great. I mean, the signings have been well attended, a lot of fun. We're having a lot of fun with a lot of the fans. Of course, the planes are awful, and I'm a little worn down, but it's a good worn out. You know, it's for all the right reasons. Yeah, it's been a great tour.
Oh, that's great. So before we get into the major questions here, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about yourself. We've all read your books, and so we know a bit about you from the back covers, but what can you tell us about you?
I'm just an ordinary guy, really, from central Massachusetts. I grew up just playing sports and having fun. And, now I'm a dad and a granddad. Got basically the same hobbies as everyone else, just like to have a good time and take care of my family and live day to day like everybody else. It's really there's nothing exceptional in my past. I was the youngest of 7, working class family. I went to college at a state school right near my house. I lived at home while I was in college because I was really kind of driving my parents around. I was, like I said, the youngest, so they were quite old at that point. I was the chauffeur, even while I was in college. Just had a good life, a very good life.
That's very good to hear. And when did you know that you wanted to become a writer?
Oh, I don't think I ever did. Maybe when I was very young. When I was very young, I used to read a lot and write a lot. I have this great collection of Charlie Brown books from the early 60s, first edition Peanuts, cartoons, if you will. And something happened as I was going through school. They kind of beat the reading and writing out of me. They kept giving me books to read that I found completely irrelevant and just not interesting at all, like Silas Marner and Ethan Frome and The Mill on the Floss and all these other books that the teachers thought were so wonderful. And I was like, oh God, shoot me now. And by the time I got out of college, I was a math major. Out of high school, I started college as a math major because I just thought reading and writing would work. They weren't fun. But my freshman year of college, my sister gave me a copy of for a Christmas present, 1977. I wanted money, she gave me books. And there was The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien's work. A couple of months later, we had this great blizzard in New England and everything was shut down. And I was trapped in my mother's house at the age of 19, essentially. And but I wasn't trapped in their house. I went to Middle-earth with Bilbo Baggins, and I had the best time. And so I fell in love with reading again. I remembered when I was a kid, all the joy I used to get out of it before school beat it out of me. And so I changed my major in college to communication so I could take all these lit courses as electives. And I just started reading, devouring everything. And my favorite genre was fantasy because that's what it turned me on. I just loved the whole imagination part of it. So I read everything that was out there. Brooks and Donaldson, Fritz Leiber, Michael Moorcock. Again, this is the late 70s, early 80s. And when I ran out of books to read, I wrote my own. Didn't write it to get published, I just wrote a book. So that I'd have something for my grandkids, if I ever had grandkids, to hold up, to their kids and say, you want to meet your great-grandfather, And it just happened. It just kept going on. Some people said, you should send this out, so I did. I got some rejection letters. So then I got angry. And if you tell me no, I'm going to prove you wrong. So I went back to work on it. A few years later, I had it where I thought it was a much better book, and I sent it out again, and one of the places was TSR, known for the Dungeons & Dragons game, and the Dragonlance novels at the time. And they called me up and they said, we don't have any room to publish independent novels, but we're looking for somebody to write the second Forgotten Realms book. Do you want to audition for it? And I was working in finance at the time. But I said, sure. It sounded like it'd be a wonderful thing, make a little extra money, and a couple of years later, I quit my job. In 1990, I just walked out. I was done. Just to write.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing.
It was, yeah. I keep pinching myself, wondering when the devil's going to come for his due, because I must have made a deal with somebody for this. I don't know how it happened. but it's been, I have a job, they pay me money to do something I love to do, and I got to watch my kids grow up.
Wow.
It doesn't get better than that.
No, I bet it doesn't. So, cut to today, when you're prepping to write your next novel, where do you continue to get that inspiration from?
Well, I'm never not writing, it seems. I'm halfway through the next book already. But to me, like with these books, I've been with these characters for 23 years. And it's almost like making a phone call and asking them what's going on. And they tell me what's happening in their lives. That's how I do the books. Now, you have to do an outline. The publisher makes you do an outline if you want to get paid. So I do my outline and I send it in, and they send me my check and I throw my outline away. And I just go with the first chapter and I sit down and I start typing, and the stories just start going again. I've never had a problem with that. I've never run out of things to say, and I have a lot of fun doing it.
Fantastic, that's awesome. My next question is, why do you write? I know that some people, they write to relax, and some other people, they write because they feel they need to write, they can't go without it. So why do you write?
Well, I think my first advice to anybody who wants to be a writer is, if you can quit, quit. I say this at every signing because I always get asked, do you have advice for a young writer? You know, if you can quit, quit. If you can't quit, you're a writer. There's got to be that need to write. There's got to be those stories clawing at your insides to get out, and you just won't be happy unless you're writing them, because it's too brutal a business to try to write if you don't love the writing. So there's that. But I realized something else particularly while I was doing these last 4 books, after all these years with these characters, where things are changing so much around my main character. It occurred to me that what writing really is, and I'm sure it's this way for most writers, probably all writers, even those that haven't figured it out yet, because I was many years before I figured it out. What writing really is creating characters, for me anyway, is creating characters who are nothing more than vehicles for me to ask myself the big questions of life and death, if you will. So really, this whole writing thing from back when I wrote that first book in 1983, when I wrote that book longhand before I was ever published, to now is a personal journey. Like everybody alive has a personal journey that they're on as they go through their life. They're asking themselves all these questions. Writing for me is just a tool to ask myself those questions, help me clarify my own thoughts, my own beliefs, my own fears, my own hopes. And that's what writing has become all these years to me.
That's amazing.
So yes, I will never retire. You can't. You're on the journey.
That's great. Glad to hear it. And you've obviously had a lot of success with writing your books. So when your first book made it onto the New York Times bestsellers list, how did that make you feel?
That was a funny day, actually. It was The Halfling's Gem. And back then, that was 1990. Back then, a book on the New York Times list meant a lot more, because if you could get on the New York Times list, it kicked in all the orders from like the supermarkets, all the smaller, like the drugstores, where they only had a few books. They were the New York Times bestsellers, were the books they sold. So as soon as I made the New York Times list with The Halfling's Gem, it really, for me, it didn't change anything for me about the writing. It wasn't that moment like when I saw my first book on the shelf. That was a very different moment. But when I made the New York Times list, in a practical manner, what it did is it doubled our orders for the book almost overnight, which meant now I could think about giving up my day job and becoming a full-time writer. And that was the profound change it had. But I never even care. I care about the lists only in as much as it means more to me. The New York Times list means more to the team that's working on the book than it does to the author. Because to get on the New York Times list, or any of the bestseller lists, except for the ones that are based strictly on sales, most of them aren't based just on sales. It means that you had good publicity for the book. It means that they did a good job in getting the book out to the stores and getting it in the stores on exactly the same day. It means they put it out the right time of the year. It means that everybody that works on a book, and there are probably 20 or 30 people behind the scenes, not counting even the people in the warehouse that work on the books. I mean, it's dozens of people. Everybody had to do their job right to get that book out there and get it on the New York Times list. That's what I like the most about the Times list, or any bestseller lists. Because what I'm more concerned with is, are the readers reading the book? Are they enjoying the book? Are they staying with me on this journey? And other than that, I don't really care. Because, I would rather get a letter from a kid that says, I never read a book until I picked up one of yours, than be on any bestseller list out there. The rest of that stuff doesn't matter to me. That's what matters to me. When you go to Fort Lewis, I was in Fort Lewis the other day, and you meet these guys who are going overseas, and they're dealing with all this stress when they're over in Afghanistan and Iraq, and they're dealing with all this stress, and they come up to you and they say, your books kept me sane. You feel like you're doing a little good in the world. So I don't care about the bestseller lists or awards or any of that garbage. That's what's real to me, the readers. And that's why I keep doing it.
Awesome, that's good to hear. Now, you've written a lot of books on the character of Drizzt Stewart, and what is it about him that keeps you coming back to him and always writing new stories with him?
He wasn't even supposed to be in the first book. He kind of got put in it, and it's a long story, but he kind of got put in at the last minute before I wrote the book, almost by accident. And he was supposed to be just a minor character in the book. And when I started writing The Crystal Shard back in 1987, like the second page I was typing was Drizzt running across the tundra when he gets jumped by the tundra yetis. And on that second page, I knew it was his book. There was something about that character that just started singing to me. And I talked about earlier about how it's a personal journey, and these characters are my vehicles to sort out my own thoughts and fears and all the rest of it. And he's just become that primary voice for me. I don't know why, I don't know how, but on all these years, he's still been there. So it's really interesting to me. It's almost like looking at my reflection in the mirror when I see him, when I see him on the page. And it's a very strange feeling. I mean, I get this with all my characters. I get it with Branson, the Highwayman, in the saga of the First King. I got it with Elbrian in the Demon Wars saga. I got it with Pony, Giuseppe in the Demon Wars saga. But with Drizzt, it's a very strong connection that I've made to the character. And I can say anything through him, and I can put him in any position to test my own beliefs, if you see what I mean. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, he's still as fresh to me as the day I wrote.